Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm so pleased to be joined by the Emmy Award-winning Andrij Parekh, a nominee this year for directing the Succession episode, America Decides. Just an absolute banger episode. Before the season, I remember I saw an interview Jesse Armstrong did where he said that he thought the most shocking episode was episode 8, America Decides. And this is before we knew what happened in Connor's wedding and all that. But I guess
Right.
I wanted to ask you, when you guys first talked about this, I think it is pretty shocking and in different ways, obviously, than Connor's wedding. But I guess what were your first conversations like about America Decides and your approach? It feels like a thriller almost to me at times, and I just was like, it's different from other feels of Succession episodes, I think. So I guess how did you kind of think about it?
Well, when I got the sort of episode synopsis from Jesse, and then the script, I read it and I immediately I was completely terrified because you realize that it was an episode within an episode. I just read it and realized how much material we're gonna have to shoot to make it feel like a real election night. How much we'd have to prepare in advance to make it feel seamless. No blue screen was used at all for any of for whatever was on televisions within ATN. So that was all prepared ahead of time. Um, and I guess my mind immediately as a director went into sort of after, of course, being excited about the script, went into logistics mode and how we were going to make this. Um, yeah, it was quite an adventure.
It's almost, I mean, like you said, it's completely believable. It's totally like that. None of it all feels like live, right? I feel like, and especially
Yeah,
watching, when you're watching, I was rewatched it before we did this interview, and I was like, when Connor is giving his speech, and you have Shiv, Sarah Snook, and Jeremy Kendall watching him, and just it's them watching it, right? Like it is really it feels,
yeah,
and
it's
it
them
feels like
watching
that.
it.
It
Yeah,
feels like it's live, right? And it
yeah.
is live, obviously. And I guess how much did that help you? I guess help you work with the actors too, that they don't have to pretend what they're seeing is happening, that they're just actually reacting to it.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing to to give actors that material to then react to. And you discover things in the performances that you could never probably have prepared, like imagined, uh if they'd shot against blue screen.
Right.
Um
Did they actually see that? Did you hold, I guess, I'm sure you did, probably maybe did more than one take or whatever, but was that the first time they're seeing stuff like that, like the speeches,
yeah, I
yeah,
would
that was it.
always, as much as we could, we would always try to hold, only show them when we were ready to shoot. And so they
Okay.
were, getting their real reactions to Connor, and yeah, and reaching out to the con heads,
It,
and Connor's speech is so great, and yeah, it was just, and the way that he takes it so seriously is so wonderful.
there's so many
Um,
great, yeah, there's so many great moments of I want to ask you about a lot of the dramatic moments. There are also so many great comedic moments, and something that I think Succession does so well is balancing the comedy and
yeah,
the drama. But you have the Connor speech, and obviously the showcase, I'd say, of the season from a comedy standpoint is the Wasabi LaCroix moment, which is just incredibly staged and so funny. And yeah, I guess how did you kind of go into that, and how do you know that it's working? I guess that kind of because it could veer so much
yeah.
into slapstick, maybe, right? Or kind of away from the show, but it's so right in the pocket of what the tone is, and I just
Yeah,
find it remarkable.
that's what I think Succession, the writing of Succession does so well is just it rides that razor thin edge of comedy and drama.
Mhm.
And the rule for myself always was that if I'm laughing at the monitor, then we've gone too far, right? Like that was my, like, if everyone's laughing at the monitor, then like we got to pull it back, and because we can make we can create the joke uh just with dramatic tension and editing. But it's like when it goes too far, it's gone too far, and when everyone's laughing, you know we've blown it a little bit. It's like Matthew McFadden and Nick Braun together, the two of them will start riling each other up, and they will not stop laughing for 5 minutes, right? And they're at their best when, just before that moment happens, right? So that's always what you're looking for, is just getting to that moment and then pulling back before it gets into total total laugh attack.
Right.
The wasabi thing, it had to be real. It had to be possible, right? That was the criteria for me, was like, this has to be something that could happen that evening. So how are we going to orchestrate this? How are we going to plant this in a way that it seems innocuous? Greg just eating the bodega sushi that he offered Tom earlier in the episode, and that Tom rejects. So he's like, okay, I'll take it, which is perfectly Greg. Yeah, again, it was really just orchestrating things for it to be real and dramatic as opposed to comedic.
Yeah. You have like this episode, I think will be remembered certainly for like the way it evoked 2016 election for a lot of people and all these different things. I guess I'm sure that was on your mind. And like, I guess like, were there specific, I guess, reference points for you or anything about that? Or was it just the general vibe of knowing what people felt like maybe, or just from that election?
I mean, the interesting and I think ironic, I don't know if it's ironic, but the interesting thing about Succession was that we shot the pilot. I think we were in like day 3 or day 4 at the 2016 election. So we had just started shooting the pilot, and there was election night party at Adam McKay's rented apartment because he lives in Los Angeles, and we were shooting in New York. And I remember that night, it was like, it started out great. Everyone was having drinks and everything was like, everyone was being optimistic. And then Adam would be getting these texts. And then 20 minutes later, we would see it, what had happened, what that news was that he had gotten on the screen, right? So you suddenly understood how news worked, right? Where, people in the know sending out, messages, and then in 20 minutes later, it's on your television. So it was really like trying to recall that emotional feeling of that election night for me, and I think for a number of people. Sort of anxiety of it, the I guess the horror of the outcome. Yeah, I mean, a lot of 2016's election is definitely in Succession, and in a way, the show. This is the ironic part. I think the show owes its success to the 2016 election, and having Fox News become so powerful and such a voice in media. And I think what Succession did really well was it sort of illustrated the kind of the the quid pro quo of American politics and media, where the political world needs the media, but the media then also needs the politics, right? And they feed each other in that way, in a I guess maybe a little bit of a tragic way. And then as we were setting up the episode, I mean, for me, American politics has always felt like a football match or a sporting event. There's scoreboards and there's colored teams, and you've got a map of which is like the game field, the playing field, and you see which who's winning and who's losing, and of course there's the electoral college and the votes, and so it really is kind of a sporting event in some ways. So a lot of that went into how we portrayed it with ATN, and then PGN and the other networks that we had. There were multiple networks in the episode, just to make the newsroom feel real.
Right. It's wild that you had to do all of this.
Yeah, it was just like just because we shot in the CNBC New Jersey, and we walked in on a number of scouts, and you'd look at like how many networks that they were actually had on TV. Not just their network, but they're also watching everyone else's news, right? The news is very aware of what news is being shown, and so I was just trying to make it feel as real as possible.
Yeah, it totally does. I think watching it again, it's a very, 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 very strong work. I want to ask you a couple of beyond the politics of the show. You have this episode, I think, is great, and I think this kind of maybe didn't get lost in the shuffle, obviously, because I think people love Succession so much. But like, there's so many great individual moments with the characters in this that like kind of springboard to the finale. So you have the scene where Shiv tells Tom that she's pregnant for the first time, and Tom's response to that is unbelievable. And then if you gave me a million guesses before the episode, I would have never guessed that's his response. And it's a huge responsibility, obviously, to bring that information to the fore, right, in this episode. I guess, like, how did you kind of like had you approached that with Matthew and Sarah and like that whole sequence?
You know, they the thing about the actors is that at this point by season 4, they know each other. They know their own roles, like, so, they know their characters. Jeremy very much lives in his character, right? Um, you know, Oftentimes I just let them do their thing and just watch, because they always surprise me. What's on the page is one thing, but then the delivery and the intent becomes another thing. And Matthew is such an amazing actor. Um, in that scene, he's doing like 6 things at once, right? And it's always it's such a joy just to sort of watch them on set perform, and they're really performing in the most beautiful and profound ways. But that scene, I think, reads pretty straightforward. I think there's nothing that Matthew says that's quite shocking, but I think it's in his delivery and in his expression that you read everything about how he's feeling about it.
Definitely. And also the fact that he's also done cocaine previously, but not is like obviously high,
Yeah,
but like not high. I
yeah,
just think it's like
yeah,
really
yeah,
remarkable.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's so much going on with him in that episode.
Really great. The other scene I wanted to ask you about, and I don't even know if this is like was on your mind at all or anybody's, but like the scene where Kendall comes to Shiv, right, to get like to talk to her, and he says does the poison drip through, and like asks if he's a good dad and stuff. And it so much echoes to me of like the scenes in I think it was season 2 in Safe Room when he comes to her again and he asks for her Shiv for a hug, Kendall,
Yeah.
and it's like a really emotional moment for the two of them. And it felt like a mirror of that, and Kendall again coming to her for some kind of family like I don't know, validation that he's not getting. And I just thought that whole sequence is great. And she has got, again, I think the seeds for her twist in the finale, or not even a twist, but her actions in the finale are kind of like already in place there.
Yeah.
And I guess like, how did you kind of like, like how did you kind of think about that? And like, kind of like, I know Jeremy, obviously, like you said, is so in character and like committed to that performance, but I guess like, how'd you think about that as the director, I guess?
I mean, what I think is interesting about America Decides for each of the siblings is that Roman seems to have the most clarity. Um, he knows exactly what he's doing in this episode. I think more so than he's kind of ever had. Like he's his father incarnate,
Mm-hmm.
right? Kendall, I think Kendall feels quite emotionally torn about the choice to support Mencken. You know, he gets the call from his ex-wife. His daughter's freaked out. He knows what a Mencken presidency is going to mean for someone as close as his daughter, his adopted daughter. Um, but he's, I think, tragically able to sort of uh, put things in different boxes, like his personal life and the business life. Somehow he's able to separate them. And so I think that's Kendall's struggle, and I think that comes through in that conversation with Shiv. And then, Shiv is clearly making a plan because she knows that she's always been on the outside of the brothers, uh, and knows that she needs to sort of fend for herself, right? And she's also pulled very strongly by her sort of democratic advisor roles that she's had, in very early episodes of the show. So, and I think that when Kendall says, like, does the poison drip through, he's talking about his father, and like, is he making the same choice that his father would make, right? Shiv's response, I think, is like, I think you're an okay dad.
Yeah.
Um, and they're talking about themselves, but they're also talking about Logan. They're talking about the relation, very much without Logan, but Logan's presence, I think, is just constantly there,
Right.
and you feel it, with the characters.
You mentioned something there that I was just wondering if you think about like this too. And so like, I think you're right. Like Roman obviously is so honest, very like maybe the most honest he's ever been, or like in this episode. And certainly like of all the characters, based on where they are, the most clear-eyed about how this doesn't have any impact on them, and they are kind of like, just like, he's very self-involved, but like it is kind of like he's not out there being like, won't someone think of the children, basically, like Shiv is. And I guess like I guess I was wondering this, like, do you think that Shiv, obviously so much of the episode is, and we've seen her talk about this in previous episodes, like afraid of Mencken and what it means to have like a kind of a fascist as the president, or, you know, like whatever. And by the end of the episode, she's kind of just like re-emerged into like a, like, kind of, I don't even know, like take down her brother's mode, right? Like in her last phone call, like to Mattson and stuff. And I guess like, did you think about that arc for her from an episode standpoint? And do you actually believe, like, is she being honest, I guess, throughout the episode to herself, or is she only really honest to herself at the end? Is that something that you like thought of, or do you agree with?
We had talked about that, and I think there's so much going on with Sarah as a character. And, you know, I think the thing about Succession was to always leave the door open to characters' motivations, right? And I think that's what makes it really interesting, is that if you sort of communicate to the audience what this person's direct intention is, like they suddenly become, I think, less interesting in a lot of ways. And it's much more interesting to sort of be, because that forces you to basically watch, right? You want to know what this person is doing. You're constantly searching for some validation of what you expect them to be doing. But for Sarah, it's like the brothers get betrayed. Kendall gets betrayed by her, right? And I think that he very quickly sides with Roman in a really childish way to choose Mencken, right? In that moment where there's that telephone call, he comes back in, finds out that Shiv's been kind of lying to him, and that, you know, Greg tells him that there's something going on between him and Mencken. So Kendall's whole, you know, all of his sort of philosophy about who should be president, who shouldn't, his compartmentalization disappears in a second, right? And he's like, I hate you. And then, you know, me and, you know, Roman and I we're going to vote for Mencken. Let's make Mencken president. And it becomes this really childish reaction, right? And I think there's a bit of that in Shiv too, right? I think that's what's the brilliance of the writing, is that even though they're adults supposedly running these amazing companies, they're still acting like children.
Definitely. Last thing before we wrap up, it's not the very end of the episode, but it's after, obviously, Mencken is elected, and you have this great shot of Sarah Shiv saying, like, things do, I think it's like, I can't believe I'm gonna butcher it, like, things do matter, Roman, right? Or is it in essence like what she says? It stood out to me even again watching it again, because it's just so unlike a lot of the shots we've seen on the show. Certainly like in that like kind of close up, and like
especially
I guess
in this episode, which felt a lot of like long zooms and a lot of whip hands, and, you know, that for me was Sarah's moment in the episode. That, you know, the boys have taken the toy and kind of broken it, and she is the one that is watching it, and I think she in many ways becomes the audience, or she's speaking for the audience at that moment.
Do you think she believes that though?
I believe it in her intention at that moment.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's good.
I think it's important that we believe that those characters can have fleeting moments of moral clarity, you know, even if they're just fleeting. But
that's really good. I really feel like I could talk about this for so long, but we do have to wrap up. Emmy Award winner Andrij Parekh, a nominee this year for America Decides. Congratulations again on your nomination, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your time.